Georgia, oh Georgia, the whole day through, just an old sweet song keeps Georgia on my mind.
Hello, friends, and welcome to a special election edition of SCLC TV. And yes, Georgia is on the mind of the nation today, with the president election coming closer and closer to being decided by the voters in Georgia. Welcome, Dr. Steele. Many say that John Lewis's district may have tipped the edge, may have tipped the balance in favor of Senator Joe Biden. Wouldn't that be something that Joe Lewis and his from the heavens or divine intervention may have tipped the balance for Joe Biden?
Yeah, of course. The spirit of Congressman John Lewis, Dr. Joe Zolari, Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian, and the list goes on. But those three in particular, in relationship to SCLC and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, is something of an impactful opportunity and event. Mayor Keisha Lance Bottom reminisced and said the same thing. Georgia on my mind, but we also have to give credit to none other than former gubernatorial candidate, a young lady who's been working very hard, Miss Stacey Abrams. I remember a few years ago, she went out on the limb and went all over Georgia because she had a vision about so many folks being unregistered. And Mr. Eaton, she registered so many folks, they had to shut down the registration poll. You know, Secretary of State at that time, Brian Kemp, who is Governor Brian Kemp now, had a big run-in with Miss Abrams. And she won, of course, along with Stacey Abrams doing an outstanding Herculean job. There's also Tyler Perry, Mr. Tyler Perry, bringing in that movie industry. What people don't realize with the movie industry of Mr. Perry, there's also other filmmaking opportunities and companies, corporations within the fabric of Atlanta, and particularly Metro Atlanta. But it started with Ms. Abrams and also other occupational opportunities, and one with the most impactful of creating jobs was Mr. Perry, Tyler Perry, which catapulted into other filmmaking industries to come to Atlanta. And you're bringing about a progression of different attitudes, culture, mindsets of people want to go with the upper mobility and not being stagnated and living in a tradition of stagnation. And I give credit to those particular concerns. Wait, before I finish. Also, Katrina brought about, Hurricane Katrina brought about people from New Orleans that came to Atlanta. Matter of fact, I know many of people who's living in Atlanta now because of Katrina. And these are all progressive people. These are entrepreneurs. You think about none other than Bishop Paul Martin. He created a church here, along with having his church in New Orleans. And he was from New Orleans. And the thing about his membership, astronomical. So there's a collaboration, but it all started with Miss Abrams, none other than her getting out and getting folks registered to vote. Salute to her.
Well, some say it really started with making good trouble from heaven with John Lewis. I heard somebody say that today. But this is historic, with Georgia possibly turning blue for the first time in decades. What does that say to the country?
Well, it say to the country, particularly southern states, you need to look to Georgia. You know, how did Georgia do that? And I was telling someone just earlier today, it's not that the traditional folks who are so conservative and had racism and prejudice within their history changed their minds. It wasn't that primarily. It was the fact that Miss Stacey Abrams got out and discovered a vision that came from God, and discovered that there were so many unregistered people in the whole state of Georgia. And she went under the radar and began to register folks. She started registering so many folks, they shut down the registration opportunities because they thought something was going on illegally. But she was right on target. They could not challenge her because she went out and did the work. Then we have Mr. Tyler Perry, God bless his soul, who had the vision to come in and work with the city of Atlanta and the county commissioners and the local government aspect, because they won't let him in Hollywood now. Don't forget that. That's another motivation opportunity for folks that got a vision and can get unstuck. They wouldn't let Mr. Tyler Perry into Hollywood. So he created his own Hollywood. He's bigger than Hollywood. He has the old folk Matt Filson properties, and he has developed it immaculate, doing a great job, creating a lot of films.
This has been a torturous vote count. We're filming this, shooting this show on Friday. We usually shoot it on Wednesday. Tuesday was election day. The vote still is not finished as we speak at 5 p.m. in the evening. It's been a torturous vote counting process. But it does show, does it not, the whole maximum that every vote counts.
I'll text my daughter who flew in, my youngest daughter, who flew in from New Orleans just to vote. She just moved to New Orleans. So her voting rights was here in Atlanta. She was too late to register in New Orleans, to show how committed and contagious it is, and what the sentiment and the atmosphere of getting out to vote and getting folks registered had upon many of people. But in this particular instance, it was my daughter. She, who's a school teacher in New Orleans, flew in on Monday night just to vote early on Tuesday morning. And guess what, Mr. Eaton? She said she was the second one in line and got her vote in. And that was really an experience for her that brought about another opportunity that she can tell not only her children, but grands and her students how committed you should be in getting the right to vote and exercising that right.
Because it does count. Despite what we may hear sometimes.
It does count. One vote can make a difference.
Yet, again, the race has not been called. But what appears to be on the horizon is still a divided country, polarized, and deeply tribal. Are you concerned about where we go from here, no matter who wins?
Yeah, I'm concerned, but I'm also encouraged by the mere fact, hopefully, of the potential of the new administration. And I did say potentially, because this is on a Friday evening that we are recording. I'm very optimistic because this country cannot take another blow in terms of the racism, the insensitiveness from the last administration, or the current administration, I should say, in terms of degrading folks, the misogynist of downgrading and looking down upon women, and the profanity that giving a speech from the Oval Office of a president and using profanity in your speech. Now, why would folks follow him? The number of folks that he currently have and has had for the last 4 years. Only two reasons that I see, and this is the Charles Steele special opinionation. Two reasons that I see is that you are either a racist or you don't care anything about morality and respectability of other people.
Well, that may be so, that's your opinion, but the records show that Trump gained some 12% of the black vote. I could be wrong on that, but he got more than the last time. Does that mean that they're not racist? Would they think it's an economic reason? Why do you attribute that higher black vote total to Donald Trump and the Republican Party?
Well, first of all, we as African Americans are black people, not monolithic.
That's true.
Meaning we're never been, even from slavery, we're not monolithic. We're not just one in one cage or category that somebody can put us in or pack us in a corner. We have the right and the freedom to make decisions. And that's dependent upon you as an individual. And what I like about it is also from this republic to show that democracy works. You have a choice. But in my perception, my brothers and sisters who come out of the transatlantic African slave trade, you should be very cognizant of the fact of what decision you make, knowing the history from which we have come, knowing the shutdown and the lockdown of Black wealth that will be at zero in the next 20 to 25 years, if not before. Knowing that when you go into a financial institution, that we only get 3% of the bank loans that's being allowed in this country. Why? Because America was founded upon white supremacy.
But again, isn't that perhaps another example of the haves versus the have-nots? Because many of those who have voted for President Trump are of the elite category.
Absolutely. Those who voted for him will be with blinders on because they only think about therefore and no more.
Themselves, yeah.
Themselves.
Let's talk about another possible record-setting, groundbreaking, record-shattering event that could potentially happen should Joe Biden win the presidency. Because coming along with him will be Senator Kamala Harris, who will be the first woman as a vice presidential candidate, a vice presidential nominee, vice presidential elect person, but also the first woman of color. That's historic, is it not?
That's very historical. And I applaud Mr. Biden as well as Senator Kamala Harris. It's something to be encouraged by and of. In my encouragement, let me give you another soundbite and another impactful moment to think about. It's not enough to get people in office. It's not enough to have people of color in places of power. It's not enough to get a photo op and be on the evening news, nationally and internationally. What are you going to do for those who are less fortunate? Poor people are always left out of the scenario and the formula of being inclusive. What are we going to do? And we must make demands, as Frederick Douglass said, and I'm being redundant. One of my favorite phrases, power concedes to nothing without a demand. I ask the African-American population as well as fair-minded thinking people of all ethnicity and background, not just African-Americans, but first African-Americans. What are we going to demand upon whoever's in office? At this particular time we're doing the show, it's not consummated on who the next president or next administration is going to be. Whoever it is, I don't care who it is. I don't care what party. We need to make demands. Power concedes to nothing. Never has and never will without a demand.
But should she become a vice president-elect, I think about my daughters and granddaughters. I know you think about your daughters and granddaughter. That says something to them about seeing what you could possibly be, does it not?
It says a lot. But what consummates the whole deal is after getting elected and being in such a powerful position, Mr. Eaton, what have you done for the least of these? This country say, in God we trust. I take you to the book of Esther when she was asked the question, what are you going to do for your people? Mordecai asked her, what are you going to do for your people? God put you in a position such as this and such a time of this. And what are you going to do with it? Time is very important. Position is very important. Influence is very important. But what's more important than any of those is your love for your people.
Finally, the eyes of the nation will remain on Georgia since we have two Senate runoffs occurring simultaneously here in Georgia up through January with Reverend Raphael Warnock versus Kelly Loeffler, Senator Kelly Loeffler, and John Ossoff. Possibly, he's on the verge of getting into a runoff with Senator David Perdue. That's the control of the Senate's in the balance. But again, the eyes of the nation will be on Georgia through January.
And it goes back to the components that I mentioned for the credit and responsibility for putting us in that position in terms of getting folks registered to vote. But the rubber meets the road when we must complete the journey of voting, the journey of participation in bringing about a respectability for those who have fallen prior to our even being born. The vote is so important, and people cannot vote one time, go home, and rest on their laurels. We must always participate. Many times folks get excited over the presidential race and don't think about the other components or the other categories of politics in electing a U.S. senator or your state legislators, in terms of your local government, municipalities. That's where the rubber meets the road. It's not just the presidential election, which is very impactful. But if you don't take care of the full circle, you have to go fully around and come back home to vote for all of the aspects of local government, state government, as well as the federal government. Many people forget about that. We must be just as motivated. And to bring about the U.S. Senate race is just as important as the presidential race.
It's going to be nasty. It's going to be a lot of money. It's going to be controversial. It's going to be exhausting. Will our people particularly go back to the polls, you think?
Well, very good question. Many times when people become despondent, and you said a lot of money going to be spent, but in my last calculation of research and with my people who bring the facts to me as well as on the ground type of observation that I give, no money being spent in the Black community, Mr. Eaton.
Right.
No politician, black, white, green, or blue, happen to care enough about the electorate of the African American community to spend money because they say, well, we all are Democrats anyway. They're going to vote for us. Hey, but that's another scenario. If you don't motivate them, stimulate the opportunity of getting them out and register and educate them why they should vote for you and get up and leave their comfortable home of their environment where they're feeling very comfortable in, then if you don't motivate them by creating a job, when you bring money or politics to the Black and African American poor community, that's job creation. And many times, and I won't get into the details, people have overlooked African Americans in spending money with Black newspapers, with Black radio stations, with Black leadership in the community, with Black entrepreneurship. The whole community of African American should benefit financially from all that money that you're spending. Some candidates, black, white, green, or blue, raise $100 million. I've done my own personal research. Not one red cent was spent in the African American or people of color community.
Well, hopefully we'll make that change as we head into the runoff. Hopefully, some suggest we'll have a Democrat president. We don't know as we speak, but we do know politics will continue to dominate the headlines as much as in the pandemic through January, to say the least. Dr. Steele, thank you for this SCLC.
Let me say this, Mr. Eaton, before you close. I have to say it. I'm being redundant again. Repetition is the mother of skill. In the next 20, 25, 30 years, Black wealth will be at zero. The federal government, the president, whoever it is, president-elect, president, whoever, need to focus upon reparation for Black people, African Americans. And you don't have to call it reparation. Just be fair in the economic development of giving opportunities to people. We don't have Black banks like we started out with 15 years ago. We had 27, 30 Black banks. We're down to 17. It's being predicted in the next 10 years, it'll be zero. And I was talking to a black banker the other day where they raised X amount of dollars. And they were promised by the federal government that the federal government was going to match it. But they didn't. And they went out of business. That's what's happening to black banks. And Lord knows, we got to be on top of this. Don't just get glorified seeing folks on TV and giving a great speech. What are you going to do? A demand must be made. Power concedes to nothing without a demand. It never has and never will. Frederick Douglass.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been SCLC TV, our political special. See you next week.